True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am, but why will you say that I am mad? The disease has sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heavens and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I had to tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Objects there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Wherever it fell upon me, my blood run cold. And to some degree, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what cautions, with what foresight, with what discrimination I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man with the during of the whole week before I killed him, and every night, about midnight, I turned the latch to his door and opened it, oh so gently. And then, when I had my opening sufficient for my head, I put in the dark lantern, all closed and closed, so that no light shone in, and then I thrust it in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrusted it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head with the opening of the far as I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, oh so cautiously, for the hinge creaked. I undid it as just as much as that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chambers and spoke courageously to him, calling him by the name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he has passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious to open the door. A watchman at hand moved more quickly than it did mine. Never before that the night I had felt an extent of my own power, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that I was opening the door little by little, and he had not even dreamed of my secret deeds and thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved into the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutter was closed fastened, and the fear of the robber. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as a pitch in the thick darkness, for the shutter was closed, fastened through the fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it oh steadily, so steadily. And I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped on a tin fastening, and the old man sprung into the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I had not heard him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watch in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of the mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief, oh no, it was a low, stifling sound that arises from the bottom of the soul who overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just as midnight, with all the world slept, it was welled up from my own bosom, deepening within the dreadful echo and the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew that what the old man felt and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight of noise, when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor." Or, "It is merely a cricket which made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these superstitions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain because death, in approaching him, had been stalked with the black shadow before him and enveloped with the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had been waiting for a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open the door, a very, very little crevice of the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, oh so stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot from out of the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with a perfect distinction, and all of the dull blue and the various veils upon the shield the very marrow into my bones. But I could see nothing else but the old man's face or person, for I had distracted the ray of the very instinct precisely upon the damned spot. And have I not told you that what you mistaken for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now, I say there came to my ear a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes me envelop in cotton. I knew the sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of the drum stimulated the soldiers into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless, and I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It was growing quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now in the dreaded hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of this old house, so strange a noise of exciting me of uncontrollable terror. Yet, for some minutes longer, I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder and louder. I thought the heart was about to burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by the neighbors. The old man's hours had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once, and once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heartbeat was a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It could not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse, and yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon his heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for over-concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and arms and legs. Then I took upon 3 planks from the floor of the chambers and disposed them from all between the scatlings. I then replaced the borders so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could even detect anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too weary of that. A tub had caught all. When I had made the end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded by the hour, there came a knocking on the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. For what I had now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity and officers of the police. A shriek had been heard from the neighbor during the night. Suspicious of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been disputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what I had to fear. I bid the gentleman welcome. The shriek I said was my own in dream. The old man I mentioned was absent to the country. I took my visitors over to the house. I bid them search well. I led them, at length, to the chamber. I showed them his treasury, secured and undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them to have the rest of their fatigue, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat at the very spot beneath which respawned the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manners had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and I answered cheerfully. They chatted on familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied the ringing in my ear, but still they sat and still chatted. The ring became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ear. No doubt I knew I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much like the sound of which makes when developing cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued with their trifles, in the high key and with violent gesticulations, but with the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor and to and fro with heavy strides, and as if excited to the fury by the observation of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated upon the boards, but the noise arose all over continuously increased. It grew louder and louder and louder, and still the men chattered pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible that they heard not? Almighty God, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew, they were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think, but anything is better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this delirious. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hark, louder and louder and louder and louder. Villains, I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, in here, it is the beating of his hideous heart.